The iron collar around her neck had left scars that would never fade. 15 years? 15 years since King Aldric had looked into her eyes and smiled as he handed her over to the slave traders. 15 years since she had screamed his name, begging him to remember who she was, what they had been to each other. He had laughed. Threnody stood at the edge of the northern cliffs, watching smoke rise from the distant palace. Not the smoke of destruction, not yet. Just the ordinary smoke of a kingdom going about its day, unaware that death was coming for its king. Behind her, 2,000 wolves waited in the valley below. They were outcasts, slaves, and rebels. Every single one of them had a reason to hate King Aldric. But none of them hated him the way Threnody did. "We could attack tonight." The voice belonged to Draft, her war commander. He was a massive wolf, his fur black as midnight, his eyes cold as winter. "The moon will be dark. Perfect for a siege." "No," Threnody said quietly. She didn't turn around. "I want him to see us coming. I want him to know exactly who's at his gates. I want him to remember the girl he sold for 300 gold pieces." "He might not remember," Draft said carefully. "He'll remember." Threnodi's voice was sharp as a blade. "I'll make sure of it." She finally turned to face him. In her human form, she was small, barely reaching Draft's shoulder, but her eyes held a fury that made even the strongest wolves step back. 15 years in the slave pits had stripped away everything soft. What remained was pure, concentrated rage. "Send a messenger to the palace," she ordered. "Tell the king that his debt has come due. Tell him Threnody is coming home." 16 years ago, Threnody had been King Aldric's niece. Her father, Prince Gareth, had been the king's younger brother. When Gareth and his wife died in a hunting accident, 10-year-old Threnody had been brought to the palace to live under the king's protection. For a year, everything had been perfect. King Aldric had been kind to her. He had given her beautiful rooms, fine clothes, and teachers to educate her. He had called her his little wolf, had promised to take care of her always. But then the war had come. The eastern kingdoms had invaded, and King Aldric had needed gold to pay his armies. The treasury had been empty. The nobles had refused to contribute more. The king had been desperate. That was when he had looked at Threnody with different eyes, not as his niece, as an asset. She remembered the night he had come to her room. She had been reading by candlelight when he entered. His face had been strange, troubled. "Threnody," he had said, "I need you to do something for me, something very important." She had set down her book, eager to help. "Anything, uncle." "I need you to go on a journey," he had continued. "There are people who want to meet you, important people. They'll take care of you for a while, until the war is over. But I want to stay here," Threnody had protested. "With you." King Aldric had smiled, but it hadn't reached his eyes. "I know, little wolf, but this is how you can help. This is how you can save the kingdom." She had believed him, even when the slave traders had come, even when they had locked the iron collar around her neck, even when King Aldric had counted the gold pieces in front of her. She had believed it was a mistake, that he would stop them, that he would save her. He hadn't. "Uncle, please," she had begged as they dragged her toward the wagon. "Uncle, it's me. It's Threnody. Don't let them take me." King Aldric had pocketed the gold and turned away. "I don't know any Threnody," he had said to the traders. "Just a wolf pup I found on the streets. She's yours now." That was the moment something inside Threnody had broken. Or perhaps it had hardened. She had stopped begging. She had stopped crying. She had looked at the king's retreating back and made a promise to herself. One day, she would return. And when she did, she would burn everything he loved to the ground. The slave traders had taken her south, to the fighting pits of Zerhan. There, wolves were bought and sold for entertainment. They fought each other, fought beasts, fought for the amusement of crowds who bet on their deaths. Threnody had been small and young. The other slaves had assumed she would die in her first fight. They had been wrong. She had killed her opponent, a wolf twice her size, by going for the throat when he had gotten cocky. The crowd had roared. The slave master had smiled, and Threnody had learned the first rule of survival: show no mercy. For 5 years, she had fought. Every day, every night, in pit after pit. She had learned to read her opponents, to use her size as an advantage, to strike fast and brutal. She had earned a reputation, the little wolf who never lost. The child who fought like a demon, but fighting wasn't enough. She had needed to escape, and for that, she had needed allies. That was when she had met Draft. He had been a veteran of the pits, scarred and weary, waiting to die. She had approached him after a fight, covered in blood that wasn't hers. "Teach me," she had demanded. He had laughed. "Teach you what? You're already the best fighter here. Teach me to lead," she had said. "Teach me to build an army, because one day I'm going to escape this place, and when I do, I'm going to need wolves who will follow me." Draft had studied her for a long moment. Then he had nodded. "All right, little wolf, I'll teach you. But first, you need to understand something. An army doesn't follow strength alone. It follows purpose. What's yours?" "Revenge," Threnody had answered without hesitation. "Good," Draft had said. "That's a purpose I can believe in." For 10 more years, they had planned. Threnody had continued fighting, winning gold for her master, while secretly recruiting other slaves. Wolves who were tired of dying for entertainment. Wolves who wanted freedom. Wolves who wanted vengeance. When the day finally came, they had struck during a festival. The guards had been drunk, the slave masters distracted. Threnody had killed her master with her bare hands, then freed every slave in the compound. Not all of them had survived the escape, but enough had. And as they fled into the wilderness, Threnody had made them a promise. "We're going north," she had told them, "to Valdir, to the palace of King Aldric, and we're going to take back everything he stole from us." Some had thought she was mad. A slave girl challenging a king? Impossible. But others had seen the fire in her eyes and believed. Those were the ones who stayed. Those were the ones who became her army. The messenger returned at sunset. He was young, barely past his first shift, and he was trembling as he approached Threnody. "Well?" she asked. "I delivered your message, General," the messenger said. His voice shook. "The king," he laughed. "He said he doesn't remember any Threnody. He said if you want to die at his gates, you're welcome to try." Threnody felt something hot and violent surge through her chest. He didn't remember. After everything, after stealing her life, selling her like an animal, he didn't even remember her name. "Good," she said softly. "Then I'll remind him." She turned to address her army. They had gathered around her, 2,000 strong, waiting for her command. She looked at each of them. These wolves who had suffered as she had, who had survived as she had. "Tomorrow, we march on the palace," she called out. Her voice carried across the valley. "King Aldric thinks we're nothing. He thinks we're just slaves and outcasts, not worth remembering. He's wrong. Tomorrow, we show him exactly what we are. We are fire, we are fury. We are the ones who will burn his kingdom to ash." The wolves howled in response. The sound echoed off the cliffs, a promise of violence to come. Threnody shifted into her wolf form. Her fur was silver white, marked with the scars of 100 battles. She was no longer the small, frightened child who had begged for mercy. She was something else now. Something dangerous. She threw back her head and howled with her army. And in that sound was 15 years of pain, of rage, of survival. Tomorrow, King Aldric would finally remember her name. That night, Threnody couldn't sleep. She lay in her tent, staring at the canvas ceiling, her mind replaying memories she had tried to bury. The palace gardens where she had played as a child. Her father's laugh. Her mother's lullabies. The way King Aldric had ruffled her hair and called her his little wolf. All of it had been a lie. Or perhaps it hadn't been, and that made it worse. Perhaps King Aldric had cared for her once, and had simply cared for gold more. "You're awake." Draft entered the tent without waiting for permission. He carried 2 cups of something that smelled like pine and smoke. "Drink this. It'll help." Threnody sat up and took the cup. The liquid was bitter but warm. "What is it?" "Old recipe from my grandmother," Draft said, settling down across from her. "She used to make it before battles." Said it calmed the mind without dulling the edge. They drank in silence for a moment. Then Draft spoke again. "Are you sure about this? Once we start, there's no going back. We'll be outlaws, rebels. Every kingdom will hunt us." "I'm sure," Threnody said. I've been sure for 15 years. And what happens after? Draft pressed. After we kill the king? After we burn the palace? What then? Threnody stared into her cup. She had spent so long focused on revenge that she hadn't thought much about what came after. What did come after? Could she just walk away, satisfied? Could she rebuild a life from the ashes? I don't know, she admitted. But I know I can't move forward until this is done. As long as King Aldric lives, as long as that palace stands, I'm still that little girl in chains. I need to end this. Draft nodded slowly. Then we'll end it. Together. Thank you, Threnody said quietly, for everything, for teaching me, for believing in me, for following me this far. Don't thank me yet, Draft replied with a grim smile. Save it for when we're standing in the ruins of that palace. As dawn broke, the army prepared to march. Threnody watched them strap on armor, sharpen weapons, say prayers to gods they hoped were listening. Some were excited, eager for battle. Others were afraid, knowing they might not survive the day. Threnody moved among them, offering words of encouragement, checking their readiness. When she reached a group of younger wolves, barely old enough to fight, she paused. You don't have to do this, she told them. If you want to leave, no one will think less of you. One of them, a girl with rust-colored fur, shook her head. We want to fight, General. The king's men killed my parents. Took our lands. I want to make them pay. The others nodded in agreement. Their eyes held the same fire Threnody felt in her own chest. All right, Threnody said, but stay close to the veterans. Listen to their commands. And if things get bad, retreat. Dead wolves can't enjoy victory. Yes, General, they chorused. By midday, they were ready. Threnody stood at the front of her army, Draft beside her. The palace was visible in the distance, its white towers gleaming in the sunlight. It looked peaceful, beautiful, untouched by the violence that was about to descend upon it. Let's go, Threnody said. They moved as one, a river of wolves flowing across the plains. As they drew closer to the city, people began to notice. Farmers fled their fields. Travelers abandoned the roads. By the time Threnady's army reached the city gates, alarm bells were ringing. The gates were closed, barred from the inside. Soldiers lined the walls, weapons drawn, but there weren't many of them. King Aldric had sent most of his army to fight in the Eastern Wars. The capital was defended by only a skeleton force. Threnody shifted into her human form and walked forward alone. She stopped just outside arrow range and called up to the walls. I am Threnody, daughter of Prince Gareth, niece of King Aldric. I have returned to claim what was stolen from me. Open the gates, and I will spare the innocent. Refuse, and I will tear down these walls stone by stone. For a moment, there was silence. Then a figure appeared on the walls. Even from a distance, Threnody recognized him. King Aldric. He was older now, his hair gray, his face lined, but his eyes were the same, cold, calculating. I don't know any Threnody, he called down. His voice was amused. Just a pack of rabid wolves who need to be put down. Archers, ready. You sold me, Threnody screamed. Her voice cracked with fury. You took your brother's daughter and sold her to slave traders for 300 gold pieces. You looked me in the eyes and called me nothing. Do you remember now? King Aldric stared down at her. For just a moment, something flickered across his face. Recognition? Regret? Then it was gone, replaced by a sneer. Oh, he said. That Threnody. Yes, I remember now. Best 300 gold I ever spent. You should thank me, girl. I made you strong. You would have been weak and useless otherwise. Something inside Threnody snapped. The last fragile piece of the child she had been shattered completely. Burn it, she said, turning to Draft. Burn it all. But even as the words left her mouth, even as her army surged forward, one question burned in her mind alongside her rage. When the palace was ash and the king was dead, would the fire inside her finally go out, or would it consume her too? Before we continue, kindly subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The first wave of arrows fell like deadly rain. Threnady's wolves scattered, most avoiding the volley with practiced ease. 3 weren't fast enough. They fell with arrows in their backs, their howls of pain cutting through the chaos. Shields up! Draft roared. Those wolves who carried shields raised them, forming a protective barrier for the others. Archers, return fire! Threnady's own archers, wolves who had stolen or scavenged bows during their journey north, sent arrows back at the walls. The city guards ducked behind stone battlements, but not all were quick enough. Screams echoed from above. "We need to get through those gates," Threnody said, her mind racing through tactical options. The gates were thick oak reinforced with iron. They wouldn't break easily. "I have an idea," said a voice behind her. Threnody turned to see Jesper, a thin wolf with burn scars covering half his face. He had been a blacksmith before slavery, and had proven invaluable in crafting weapons for the army. "We can make fire bombs. Pitch and oil. Wrapped in cloth. Throw enough at the gates and we'll burn them down." "How long?" Threnody asked. "Give me 2 hours," Jesper replied. "Maybe 3. "You have 1, Threnody said. "After that, they'll send for reinforcements from the eastern armies." Jesper nodded and ran back toward the supply wagons. The siege settled into an uneasy rhythm. Threnady's wolves stayed just out of arrow range, occasionally sending volleys at the walls to keep the defenders pinned down. The city guards, for their part, seemed content to wait behind their fortifications. But Threnody knew this couldn't last. Every moment they delayed gave King Aldric time to prepare, time to call for help. They needed to breach those walls before nightfall. She walked through her forces, checking on the wounded, speaking words of encouragement. The 3 wolves who had been hit in the first volley were being tended to by Lysara, their only healer. She was a gentle wolf, older, with gray streaking her brown fur. "How bad?" Threnody asked quietly. Lysara shook her head. 2 will live. But Corin. She gestured to the smallest of the 3, a young male barely past his first shift. The arrow punctured his lung. "There's nothing I can do." Threnody knelt beside Corin. His breathing was shallow, wet. Blood bubbled at the corners of his mouth. When he saw her, he tried to smile. "Did we win, General?" he whispered. Threnody felt her throat tighten. "Not yet. But we will, because of brave wolves like you." "Good," Corin breathed. "Tell my sister. Tell Marissa I fought well." "I will," Threnody promised. Corin's eyes closed. His breathing stopped. Threnody stayed kneeling beside him for a long moment, one hand resting on his still chest. This was the cost of revenge. Young wolves dying for her anger. Was it worth it? Then she remembered King Aldric's laughter, his casual dismissal of her suffering, the way he had counted gold pieces while she screamed. Yes, it was worth it. She stood and walked away, leaving Lysara to prepare Corin's body. Around her, wolves watched with somber expressions. They understood. This was war. Death was part of it. "General!" Jesper came running, carrying a cloth sack. Inside, Threnody could see clay pots sealed with wax. "The firebombs are ready." 40 of them. "Should be enough to bring down those gates." "Good work," Threnody said. She raised her voice, calling out to her army. "Wolves of the Free North! The gates are about to fall. When they do, we pour through. Remember your training. Stick together, watch each other's backs, and show no mercy to those who fight us. But spare the civilians. Our quarrel is with the king, not his people." A chorus of howls answered her. Threnody took one of the firebombs herself. It was heavier than she expected, the clay pot warm in her hands. She could smell the pitch inside, thick and pungent. "Light them," she ordered. Wolves with torches moved forward, touching flame to the oil-soaked cloth wrapped around each pot. One by one, the bombs caught fire. "Throw!" Threnody commanded. She hurled her bomb toward the gate with all her strength. It arced through the air, trailing smoke, and shattered against the wood. Fire exploded outward, clinging to the gate like a living thing. Around her, 39 other bombs flew, each one adding to the inferno. The guards on the walls shouted in alarm. Some tried to pour water down, but it wasn't enough. The pitch burned too hot, spread too fast. Within minutes, the gates were engulfed in flames. "Get ready," Draft bellowed. "As soon as those gates fall, we charge." The fire roared, consuming the ancient oak. The iron reinforcements began to glow red. And then, with a crack like thunder, the gates collapsed inward, leaving a gaping hole in the city's defenses. "Now!" Threnody screamed. She shifted into her wolf form mid-stride, hitting the ground on 4 legs, already running. Her army surged forward with her, a tide of fur and fang and fury. They poured through the burning gates into the city beyond. The heat was intense, singeing fur and skin, but Threnody didn't slow. Guards waited on the other side, weapons raised, but they looked terrified. They had never faced an army of enraged wolves before. The battle was brief and brutal. Threnody's wolves tore through the first line of defense in seconds. Some guards fought. Most ran. A few dropped their weapons and surrendered. And Threnody's wolves let them live, just as she had commanded. The city streets were chaos. Civilians fled screaming into their homes, barring doors and windows. Threnody ignored them, her focus solely on the palace ahead. It sat at the heart of the city, surrounded by its own walls. But these walls were shorter, more ornamental than defensive. They wouldn't hold. "To the palace!" she howled. Her wolves followed, flowing through the streets like a silver river. They reached the palace walls within minutes. Here, more guards waited, better armed and better trained than the city watch. These were the king's personal soldiers, men who had sworn oaths to die for their monarch. "Break formation," Draft commanded. "Spread out, don't give them easy targets." The wolves scattered, making themselves harder to hit, as arrows flew from the palace battlements. But they kept moving forward, kept closing the distance. When they reached the walls, some wolves simply leaped, their powerful legs carrying them up and over. Others found gates and began battering them down. Threnody went over the wall in a single bound. She landed in the palace courtyard, her claws scrabbling for purchase on the smooth stones. Guards rushed at her immediately, spears thrust forward. She dodged left, feeling a spear point graze her shoulder. Pain flared, but she ignored it. She caught the guard's wrist in her jaws and bit down hard. Bones crunched. The man screamed and dropped his spear. More wolves poured over the walls behind her. The courtyard became a battleground, wolves and guards clashing in desperate combat. Blood stained the white stones red. "Push forward," Threnody commanded, "into the palace." The main doors stood before them, massive and ornate, carved with scenes of past glories. Threnody threw herself against them, but they didn't budge. They were barred from the inside. "Stand back!" Jesper appeared beside her, carrying more firebombs. "Let's see how well these doors burn." He lit 3 bombs and hurled them at the doors in quick succession. The explosions were deafening. Fire engulfed the entrance, and the carved wood began to blacken and crack. "Again!" Jesper shouted. He threw 3 more. This time the doors splintered. Not completely, but enough. Threnody could see the gaps, the weakness. She shifted into her human form and grabbed a fallen spear. "With me!" she yelled. A dozen wolves joined her, ramming their shoulders against the damaged doors. Once, twice, 3 times. The doors burst inward. Threnody stumbled into the palace, her heart pounding. She was inside. After 15 years, she was home. But it didn't feel like home. The grand entrance hall looked the same. Marble floors, soaring ceilings, tapestries depicting ancient battles. But it felt alien now, like a place from a dream that had twisted into a nightmare. Guards filled the hall, forming defensive lines. Behind them, Threnody could see servants cowering in doorways, their faces pale with terror. "Surrender," Threnody called out in her human voice. "Drop your weapons and you'll be spared. This doesn't have to be a massacre." For a moment, the guards hesitated. Then one of them, a captain with gray in his beard, stepped forward. "We cannot," he said. His voice was steady despite the fear in his eyes. "We swore oaths. We will defend our king." "Your king sold children into slavery," Threnody replied. "He drained the treasury for his own pleasures while people starved. He deserves no loyalty." "Perhaps," the captain agreed, "but an oath is an oath. I'm sorry, girl. I truly am. But we will not stand aside." Threnody felt something twist in her chest. These men weren't evil. They were just trying to honor their promises. But they stood between her and Aldric, and she couldn't let anything stop her now. "Then you'll die for a king who isn't worth it," she said quietly. The captain raised his sword. So be it. The battle for the entrance hall was longer and bloodier than the courtyard fight. These guards were skilled, trained since boyhood to fight as a unit. They formed shield walls, covered each other's flanks, retreated in good order when pressed. But Threnedy's wolves were driven by something stronger than training. They were driven by years of suffering, by scars that would never heal, by dreams of freedom that had sustained them through the darkest nights. They fought like demons, accepting wounds they should have avoided, pushing forward when they should have fallen back. Slowly, inevitably, the guards were overwhelmed. The captain fell with a wolf's jaws around his throat, still trying to swing his sword. Others followed, one by one, until the hall was silent, except for the moans of the wounded. Threnody stood in the center of the carnage, breathing hard. Blood matted her fur. She didn't know how much was hers. She shifted back to human form and immediately regretted it. The pain hit all at once, cuts on her arms, a deep gash across her ribs, burns from the fire at the gates. "General, you're hurt," Lysara said, appearing at her side. The healer had blood on her hands from treating wounded wolves. "I'm fine," Threnody lied. "Where's Draft?" "Here." Draft limped forward. He had a spear wound in his leg, but was still standing. "We've secured the lower floors, but Aldric isn't here. He's retreated to the throne room on the upper level." "Of course he has," Threnody said. She looked around at her wolves. Many were wounded, some were dead. But they had done it. They had breached the palace. "Leave half our force here to secure the entrance," she ordered. "The rest come with me. It's time to end this." They climbed the grand staircase, leaving bloody paw prints on the white marble. Servants watched from hiding places, too terrified to move. Threnody ignored them. Her focus was singular now. Everything had been leading to this moment. At the top of the stairs, they found more guards waiting. But these guards looked uncertain, afraid. When they saw the army of wolves ascending toward them, many simply ran. Smart, Threnody thought. The throne room doors stood before them, gilded and magnificent. Threnody could hear voices inside. Aldric was arguing with someone, his voice raised in anger. She pushed the doors open. The throne room was exactly as she remembered. High ceilings painted with clouds and angels, stained glass windows casting colored light across the floor. And at the far end, the throne itself, gold and jewels, too large and too ornate, built by a king who cared more about appearance than substance. King Aldric sat on that throne, but he wasn't alone. A dozen guards surrounded him, the last of his loyal defenders. And standing beside him was someone Threnody hadn't expected to see. Councillor Brennick. He had been her father's friend, had spoken at her parents' funeral, had promised to watch over her. He was the one who had brought her to the palace after their deaths. And now he stood beside the man who had sold her. "You," Threnody breathed. "You knew. You helped him." Brennick had the grace to look ashamed. "I tried to stop him, child. Truly I did. But the king needed gold. The war was going badly. What was one orphan girl compared to the safety of the kingdom? What was I?" Threnady's voice rose. "I was a child. I was my father's daughter. And you let him sell me like cattle." "It was necessary," Brennick insisted, but his voice wavered. "It was evil," Threnody spat. She turned her attention to Aldric. "Get up." The king remained seated, trying to look unconcerned. But Threnody could see the fear beneath his bravado. His hands gripped the armrests too tightly. Sweat beaded on his forehead. "Why should I?" he asked. "You're just a slave who got lucky. You have no authority here." "I have this," Threnody replied, gesturing to the army of wolves behind her. "And this." She tapped her chest, where her heart beat with 15 years of accumulated rage. "Now get up, or I'll drag you off that throne." For a long moment, king and niece stared at each other. Then Aldric slowly stood. "What now?" he asked. "You kill me? Burn the palace? Congratulations, you'll be Queen of Ashes. Is that what you want?" "Yes," Threnody said simply. "If ashes are all you deserve, then yes." She raised her hand, ready to give the order to attack. But before she could speak, something happened that changed everything. One of the stained glass windows exploded inward. A massive wolf crashed through it, landing in the center of the throne room. This wolf was bigger than any Threnody had ever seen, his fur coal black, his eyes burning yellow. And behind him came more. 20, 30, 50 wolves poured through the broken window, through the doors, from hidden passages. They wore the king's colors around their necks. Threnady's stomach dropped. King Aldric hadn't sent all his forces to the Eastern War. He had kept his own wolf guard hidden. Waiting for exactly this moment, Aldric's smile was triumphant. "Did you really think I wouldn't prepare for this? I've been expecting you for years, little niece. Every runaway slave eventually comes home. I just had to wait." The massive black wolf shifted into human form. He was a mountain of a man, scarred and brutal looking. "Kill them all," King Aldric commanded, "but bring me the girl alive. I think 300 gold was too cheap the first time. Let's see what she's worth now." And as the throne room erupted into violence, as her wolves clashed with the king's guard, Threnody realized she had made a terrible mistake. She had been so focused on revenge that she hadn't considered the possibility that the king might actually be ready for her, that he might be stronger, that she might lose. But it was too late to turn back now. All she could do was fight and hope that 15 years of suffering had made her strong enough to survive what came next. Would revenge be worth it if she died before she could taste it? The throne room became a slaughterhouse. Threnody barely had time to shift before the massive black wolf was on her. His jaws snapped inches from her throat. She rolled sideways, feeling his teeth catch fur but not flesh. Around her, chaos erupted. Her wolves clashed with the king's guard in a tangle of teeth and claws. The sounds were deafening. Snarls, screams, the wet crunch of bones breaking. The black wolf came at her again. Threnody met him head-on this time, rising on her hind legs, their bodies colliding with brutal force. He was stronger, heavier, but she was faster. When he tried to bite, she ducked under his jaws and raked her claws across his belly. He howled in pain and rage, stumbling backward. Blood darkened his fur. "General!" Draft's voice cut through the noise. He was fighting 3 guards at once, holding them back but barely. "We're outnumbered." Threnodi's mind raced. He was right. The king's wolf guard was fresh, well-fed, trained. Her army was exhausted from the siege, wounded, running on pure determination. If this turned into a prolonged battle, they would lose. She needed to change the equation. "Fall back," she commanded, her voice carrying across the throne room. "Retreat to the lower floors. Regroup." Her wolves obeyed instantly, fighting their way toward the exits. The king's guard pursued, sensing victory. But as Threnody's wolves retreated down the stairs, she stayed behind with Draft and a handful of her best fighters. "What are you doing?" Draft demanded. "We need to go." "No," Threnody said, shifting back to human form. She grabbed a fallen torch from the wall. "We need to finish this." "Jesper, do you have any firebombs left?" Jesper appeared from behind a pillar, bleeding from a gash across his face, but still carrying his sack of bombs. "6 left, General." "Give them to me," Threnody ordered. "All of them." "Threnody, what are you planning?" Draft asked, though from his tone he already knew. "What I came here to do," she replied. She looked at the throne room, at the tapestries hanging from the walls, at the ancient wooden beams supporting the ceiling, at the king cowering behind his guards. "I'm going to burn it all down." King Aldric heard her. His face went pale. "You wouldn't. You'd kill everyone. Your own wolves, my people, everyone in the palace." "I gave the evacuation order," Threnody said coldly. "My wolves are already leaving. Your people should too. You have 5 minutes." She lit the first firebomb and hurled it at the tapestries. They caught instantly, flames racing up the ancient cloth. She threw the second at the throne itself. The cushions ignited, golden jewels melting in the heat. "Stop her!" Aldric screamed. But his guards hesitated. They could see what was happening, could feel the heat already building. Self-preservation warred with duty. Threnody threw the 3rd bomb, then the 4th. The wooden beams began to smoke. The stained glass windows cracked from the temperature change. The entire throne room was becoming an inferno. "Fall back now!" Draft roared to their remaining fighters. "Everyone out!" They ran for the stairs. The king's guards, no longer caring about duty or honor, ran with them. Even the massive black wolf who had nearly killed Threnody fled, limping from his wounds but moving fast. King Aldric remained frozen on his throne, watching his kingdom burn around him. Counselor Brennick grabbed his arm. "Sire, we must go." "No," Aldric whispered. "Not like this. I won't run from a slave girl." "Then you'll die from one," Brennick shouted. He tried to drag the king toward the exit, but Aldric shoved him away. "Go! Save yourself if you want. I'm not leaving." Brennick looked at Threnody, his eyes pleading. She met his gaze and shook her head. No mercy. Not anymore. Brennick fled. Threnody stood at the throne room entrance, the 5th firebomb in her hands. The heat was intense now, nearly unbearable. Smoke filled the air, making her eyes water. "Last chance, uncle," she called out. "You can run. Live to see another day. I won't stop you." King Aldric finally looked at her, really looked at her, seeing not just the slave he had sold, but the woman she had become, strong, scarred, unbreakable. "You were just a child," he said. His voice was strange, almost confused. "A little girl who liked honey cakes and flower crowns. How did you become this?" "You made me this," Threnody replied. "When you put that collar around my neck, when you counted your gold while I screamed, when you forgot my name, you created this, uncle. I'm exactly what you made me." Something flickered in Aldric's eyes. Was it regret? Guilt? It didn't matter. "Not anymore. I'm sorry," he said quietly. "No, you're not," Threnody said, "but you will be." She threw the last firebomb. It arced through the air, trailing smoke, and shattered at the base of the throne. The explosion was massive, fed by all the other fires. The throne itself caught, gold beginning to melt and run like tears. Threnody turned and ran. Behind her, she heard Aldric scream. Whether from pain or rage or despair, she didn't know. She didn't look back. She raced down the stairs, taking them 3 at a time. The entire palace was burning now, smoke poured from every window. Servants and guards fled through any exit they could find, coughing and crying. Draft waited for her at the main entrance. Everyone's out. Most of the king's guard fled into the city, the rest surrendered. "Good," Threnody gasped. The smoke had seared her lungs. "Get our wounded out. Get everyone as far from the palace as possible." "What about you?" Draft asked. "I need to make sure it all burns," Threnody replied. "Every room, every hall, everything he built on my family's blood." She shifted into her wolf form and ran back into the burning palace. The heat was agonizing, but she pushed through it. She had spent 15 years dreaming of this moment. She wasn't going to miss it. She raced through the corridors, checking rooms, making sure the fire had caught everywhere. In the library, she saw ancient books turning to ash. In the treasury, she watched gold coins melt into pools of liquid metal. In the armory, weapons exploded from the heat. And in her mother's old chambers, she found something that made her stop. The room was exactly as her mother had left it. The blue silk curtains, the carved wooden furniture, even the perfume bottles on the vanity, untouched all these years. Threnody shifted to human form and walked slowly to the vanity. She picked up one of the bottles, pulled the stopper, and inhaled. Roses and jasmine. Her mother's scent. For just a moment, standing in that room with smoke curling under the door, Threnody felt 10 years old again. She could almost see her mother sitting at the vanity, brushing her long dark hair, smiling at Threnody in the mirror. "I did it, Mama," she whispered. "I made him pay." But the victory felt hollow. Her mother was still dead, her father was still dead, 15 years of her life were still gone, lost to slavery and violence. Burning the palace couldn't give her those things back. The flames reached the doorway. Threnody carefully set down the perfume bottle and shifted back into wolf form. She ran, leaving her mother's chambers to the fire. She burst out of the palace just as part of the roof collapsed. The sound was like thunder, stones and timbers crashing down. The heat was so intense that even from 100 yards away, Threnody could feel it singing her fur. Her army gathered in the palace courtyard, watching the building burn. Some cheered. Others stood in shocked silence. Many wept, overwhelmed by emotion they couldn't name. Threnody shifted back to human form and just stood there, staring at the inferno, the palace that had been her home, the place where she had been happy, before everything went wrong. It was all turning to ash. "Is he dead?" a voice asked. Threnody turned to see one of her younger wolves, the rust-colored girl who had been so eager to fight. "Yes," Threnody replied. The king is dead. Good, the girl said fiercely. Then more quietly, why don't I feel better? Threnody didn't have an answer. She felt the same way. Empty, tired. Like she had been running for so long that she had forgotten how to stop. General, Lysara called out. We have wounded who need attention. And the city watch is regrouping. They're not attacking, but they're watching. We need to decide our next move. Our next move? Threnody repeated. She hadn't thought past this moment. What did come next? Some of the wolves are saying we should take the city, Draft said, joining them. Make it ours. Rule it. Others want to leave, Quintara added. They've had their revenge. They want to go home, wherever that is. Threnody looked around at her army. 2,000 wolves who had followed her this far. They were looking at her, waiting for her to lead. But lead them where? Before she could answer, a commotion arose at the courtyard gates. The city watch was letting someone through. A woman, middle-aged, dressed in the simple clothes of a merchant. She walked straight toward Threnody with no fear. Are you the one who killed King Aldric? The woman asked. I am, Threnody replied. Good, the woman said. Then she spat on the ground. That bastard taxed my business into bankruptcy. My husband died in his wars. My sons were conscripted and never came back. I hope he suffered. Other civilians began entering the courtyard, not to attack, just to watch the palace burn. And as Threnody looked at their faces, she saw not fear, but relief, even joy. Is it true? An old man called out. Is the tyrant really dead? He's dead, Threnody confirmed, and his palace is burning. A cheer went up from the crowd. It started small but grew, spreading through the watching civilians. They weren't mourning their king. They were celebrating his death. Threnody felt something shift inside her. She had expected to have to fight the people, to force them to accept her revenge. But they didn't need forcing. They were grateful. People of Valdir, she called out, her voice carrying across the courtyard. King Aldric is dead. His reign of corruption and cruelty is over. I am Threnody, daughter of Prince Gareth, and I have returned to. She stopped. What was she returning to do? Rule? She had never wanted that. She had only wanted revenge. I have returned to give you a choice, she continued. You can rebuild. You can choose new leaders, better leaders. You can make this kingdom into something worth being proud of. Or you can fall back into the same patterns, the same corruption. It's up to you. What about you? The merchant woman asked. Will you be our queen? Threnody looked at the burning palace, at her exhausted army, at the civilians watching her with hope in their eyes. No, she said finally. I'm not a queen. I'm just a wolf who survived long enough to bite back, but I'll help you rebuild. I'll make sure whoever comes next isn't another tyrant. And then I'll decide what comes next. It wasn't a grand speech. It wasn't inspiring or poetic, but it was honest. And somehow, that seemed to be enough. The palace burned through the night. By dawn, all that remained were blackened stones and melted gold. The great symbol of King Aldric's power had been reduced to rubble and ash. Threnody stood among the ruins as the sun rose. She had sent most of her army to set up camp outside the city. Only Draft remained with her, a silent presence at her side. Do you regret it? He asked quietly. Which part? Threnody replied. Killing him? Burning the palace? Surviving when I should have died in those pits? Any of it. All of it. Threnody thought about that for a long time. No, she said finally. I don't regret it. He deserved what he got. But, Draft prompted. But it didn't fix anything, Threnody admitted. I thought when he was dead, when this place was ashes, I would feel whole again. Like I could be that little girl again, the one who existed before the collar. But she's gone. She died the day he sold her, and no amount of revenge can bring her back. So what now? Draft asked. What does a wolf do when she spent 15 years focused on one goal, and suddenly that goal is accomplished? I don't know, Threnody said, but I guess I have time to figure it out. She looked down at the ruins beneath her feet. Somewhere under all this rubble was King Aldric's body, burned beyond recognition. She had dreamed of this moment for so long. She had imagined feeling triumphant, vindicated, free. Instead, she just felt tired. But maybe that was okay. Maybe freedom didn't feel like triumph. Maybe it just felt like the ability to rest without fear. The ability to wake up without immediately thinking about survival. The ability to imagine a future that wasn't defined by the past. "Come on," she said to Draft. "Let's go. There's work to do." As they walked away from the ruins, Threnody allowed herself one last look back. The palace that had been her prison and her target was gone. King Aldric was dead. The collar around her neck had been broken years ago, but today, finally, the chains around her mind felt lighter. Revenge hadn't healed her, but it had given her closure. And sometimes that was enough. The question that had haunted her in the throne room now had an answer. Yes, revenge had been worth it. Not because it had made her whole, but because it had allowed her to stop carrying the weight of what had been done to her. She had fought back. She had survived. She had won. What came next was up to her, and for the first time in 15 years, that thought didn't terrify her. It gave her hope. 3 days after the palace burned, Threnody sat in a commandeered merchant's hall that had been converted into a temporary headquarters. Maps covered the large wooden table before her. Reports piled up on either side. Draft, Quintara, and several other commanders surrounded her, all looking exhausted. "The Eastern Army is 2 weeks away," Quintara reported. "When they hear the king is dead, they'll march on the capital. That's 5,000 trained soldiers." "We have 2,000 wolves," Draft countered, "most of them wounded or exhausted. We can't fight another war. Not right now. We won't have to," came a voice from the doorway. Councillor Brennick stood there, looking older than he had just days ago. His clothes were singed, his face haggard. "May I enter?" Threnodi's hand moved instinctively to her knife. "Give me one reason why I shouldn't kill you where you stand." "Because I can help you avoid more bloodshed," Brennick replied calmly. "The Eastern Army won't attack if there's no reason to. If the capital is stable, if there's a legitimate government in place, if the people aren't rioting in the streets, then the generals will have no justification for a coup. And you're offering to help create this legitimate government?" Threnodi's voice dripped with suspicion. "The same man who helped sell me into slavery?" "I know what I am," Brennick said quietly. "I'm a coward who chose survival over morality. I let a monster rule because I was afraid of what would happen if I opposed him. And I will carry that shame until I die. But right now, this kingdom needs stability, and I know how to provide it." "She could just kill you and figure it out herself," Draft growled. "She could," Brennick agreed. "But every day we waste arguing is another day the city descends into chaos. Already, there's looting in the merchant quarter, fights over food. The nobles are barricading themselves in their estates, afraid of mob violence. Without leadership, this city will tear itself apart." Threnody studied the old counselor. She hated that he was right. "What's your proposal?" "Form a provisional council," Brennick said. "Representatives from the nobles, the merchants, the common citizens, and your wolf army. Rule together until elections can be held. Show the Eastern Army that the capital is under control, that there's no power vacuum for them to fill." "And what do you get out of this?" Threnody asked. "A chance to do something right for once," Brennick replied. "Or perhaps just a delayed execution. I'll accept either." Threnody looked at her commanders. Draft shook his head slightly, warning against trust. But Quintara seemed thoughtful. "It's not a bad plan," Quintara admitted. "We can't hold this city by force alone. We need the people's cooperation." "Fine," Threnody decided. "We'll form your council. But Brennick, understand this. You work for us now. One sign of betrayal, one hint that you're playing games, and I'll finish what the fire started. Clear?" "Crystal," Brennick said with a slight bow. Over the next week, Threnody barely slept. The Provisional Council was formed, arguments breaking out constantly as nobles, merchants, and commoners fought over every detail. Food distribution had to be organized. The city watch had to be reformed. Repairs had to begin on the damaged walls and gates. And through it all, Threnody had to navigate politics she barely understood. She was a fighter, not an administrator. But she learned quickly, watching how Brennick negotiated, how Lady Solène mediated disputes, how the merchant representatives bartered and compromised. "You're getting better at this," Draft observed one evening. They stood on the city walls, looking out over Valdir. Lights twinkled in windows. Smoke rose from chimneys. Life was returning to normal, slowly. I hate it, Threnody admitted. I'd rather fight 10 battles than sit through another budget meeting. But you're doing it anyway, Draft noted. Because you know it matters. Because I started this, Threnody corrected. I tore down the old system. I have a responsibility to make sure what replaces it isn't worse. A messenger approached, bowing quickly. General, there's someone here to see you. She says she knew you when you were a child. Threnodi's heart skipped. Send her in. The woman who entered was thin and gray-haired, wearing a faded dress that had once been fine. It took Threnody a moment to recognize her. Then it clicked. Mistress Penelope, she breathed. You were my governess. Oh, child, Penelope whispered. Tears streamed down her weathered face. Look at you. You survived. You actually survived. They embraced, and Threnody felt something crack inside her. This woman had taught her to read, to write, to behave like a princess. She had been kind when kindness was rare in the palace. I thought you were dead, Threnody said, pulling back. Where have you been? Aldric dismissed me the day after he sold you, Penelope explained. He said I had failed in my duties. I've been living in the lower city ever since, taking in sewing work to survive. She looked around at the merchant hall, at the maps and documents. Is it true that you've taken control of the capital? For now, Threnody said, until we can establish something more permanent. Your mother would be proud, Penelope said softly. And your father? They always said you had strength in you. Did they? Threnody asked. She had so few memories of her parents. What were they like? Really like? Not the official stories. Penelope smiled. Your father loved terrible jokes. He would tell them at state dinners and embarrass your mother terribly. And your mother, she had a fierce temper when roused, but she would always forgive people eventually. She believed everyone deserved a second chance. Even King Aldric, Threnody asked bitterly. She tried to give him chances, Penelope said. After your father died, Aldric was supposed to help her rule. She trusted him, and he betrayed that trust. He betrayed more than trust, Threnody said. He murdered her. In her sleep, made it look like an accident. Penelope's eyes widened. How do you know that? A servant told me, one who witnessed it. Aldric had been poisoning her slowly for months, weakening her. Then one night, he smothered her with a pillow while she slept. Threnody's fists clenched. He killed his own sister-in-law for a crown. Dear gods, Penelope whispered. I knew he was cruel, but I didn't know. I'm so sorry, child, for everything you've suffered. Don't be sorry, Threnody said. It's over now. He's dead. The palace is ashes. Justice was served. Was it? Penelope asked gently. Or was it just revenge? The question hung in the air. Threnody didn't have an answer. 2 weeks after the palace burned, the Eastern Army arrived. They made camp outside the city walls, 5,000 strong, battle-hardened and disciplined. Their commander, General Hadrix, requested a meeting with the city's leadership. Threnody stood at the gates with her provisional council to greet him. Hadrix was a bear of a man, scarred and grizzled, with eyes that had seen too much death. So you're the one who killed King Aldric? He said, looking Threnody up and down. You're younger than I expected. Smaller too. Size doesn't matter in a fire, Threnody replied coolly. Your king learned that. He wasn't my king, Hadrix said surprisingly. I served the kingdom, not the man. And from what I've been hearing, Aldric was a bastard who deserved what he got. This was not what Threnody had expected. Then why are you here? Why bring an army if not to avenge him? Because my soldiers need to be paid, Hadrix said bluntly. We've been fighting in the East for 3 years. We're tired, we're broke, and we want to go home. Can you pay us? Threnody hesitated. The treasury was mostly melted in the fire, but we're collecting taxes, reorganizing the finances. We can pay you, but it'll take time. How much time? Hadrix demanded. 3 months? Brennick interjected. Maybe 4. We'll need to send tax collectors out to the provinces, consolidate the accounts. But I promise you, General, your soldiers will be paid. Hadrix studied them all carefully. Then he nodded. Fine. My army will make camp here for 3 months. But understand this. If you try to cheat us, if you take advantage of our patience, we will take what we're owed by force. Are we clear? Crystal? Threnody agreed. As Hadrix left, Draft leaned close to Threnody. Do you trust him? No, Threnody admitted. But I don't think we have a choice. If we fight his army now, we'll lose. Better to buy time and hope we can actually pay them. And if we can't? Draft pressed. Then we'll deal with that problem when we come to it, Threnody said. But privately, she wondered the same thing. How had she gone from slave to general to politician in the space of a month? And how long could she maintain this balancing act before everything collapsed? That night, Threnody walked through the ruins of the palace alone. She did this sometimes, when the stress of leadership became too much. There was something calming about the silence here, the stillness. She found the spot where the throne room had been. The throne itself was gone, melted into a twisted lump of metal, but she could still see the outline of where it had stood. Did I do the right thing? She whispered to the ashes. Burning it all down? Or did I just trade one tyrant for chaos? No answer came. She hadn't expected one. You know, talking to ruins is a sign of madness, a voice said behind her. Threnody spun, her hand going to her knife. But it was just Lysara, the healer. What are you doing here? Threnody asked. Same as you. Lysara replied. Seeking peace. Or answers. Or maybe just a moment away from all the demands and responsibilities. She came to stand beside Threnody. You're struggling. Is it that obvious? Threnody asked wryly. To me, yes, Lysara said. You're carrying too much weight. You're trying to be general, ruler, judge, and symbol all at once. No one can sustain that. What choice do I have? Threnody demanded. If I show weakness, the nobles will try to seize power. If I step back, the city falls into chaos. If I fail, everyone who followed me, everyone who died in that siege, it will all have been for nothing. Or, Lysara said gently, you could accept that you're not meant to rule. You're a warrior, Threnody, a survivor. You did what you set out to do. You got your revenge. Now let others handle the rebuilding. Just walk away? Threnody shook her head. I can't. Why not? Lysara asked. What's really keeping you here? Threnody opened her mouth to answer, then closed it. What was keeping her here? Duty? Guilt? Or was it something else? The fear that if she walked away, if she stopped fighting and planning and struggling, she would have to face the emptiness inside her, the vast, aching hole where her childhood and innocence used to be. I don't know who I am if I'm not fighting, she admitted quietly. Then maybe it's time to find out, Lysara suggested. The council can function without you. Brennick and Solen know what they're doing. Draft and Quintara can handle military matters. You've built something stable, now let it stand on its own. And what would I do? Threnody asked. Whatever you want? Lysara said simply, travel, rest, find a quiet place and just exist for a while. Figure out who Threnody is when she's not defined by her pain. The idea was terrifying and tempting in equal measure, to just walk away, to be no one, to have no responsibilities except to herself. Could she do that, after everything? She didn't know. But for the first time since returning to Valdir, she wanted to find out. 3 months passed. True to Brennick's word, the taxes were collected, the treasury was replenished, and General Hadrix's soldiers were paid. They marched east, back to their homes, leaving the capital in peace. The Provisional Council solidified into something more permanent. Elections were held for common representatives. The nobles agreed to a charter, limiting their powers. Slowly, painfully, a new government took shape. And through it all, Threnody felt more and more like a ghost. She attended meetings but rarely spoke. She signed documents but didn't read them closely. She was there, but not really present. Draft noticed first. You're leaving, aren't you? He asked one evening. Threnody looked at him in surprise. How did you know? Because I know you, Draft replied. You've been saying goodbye in small ways for weeks now. Training others to take over your duties. Settling debts, tying up loose ends. Where will you go? I don't know, Threnody admitted. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere I can figure out who I am when I'm not at war. You'll come back, Draft said confidently. Will I? Threnody wasn't so sure. You will, Draft insisted, because, for better or worse, this is your home. You burned down the palace, but you can't burn down your history. It's part of you now. He was probably right. But Threnody needed to try. She needed to see if she could exist as something other than a weapon pointed at the past. On a cool morning in early autumn, Threnody left Valdir. She told no one except Draft and Lysara. No ceremony, no speeches, no grand farewell. She simply shifted into her wolf form and ran. She ran north, into the forests where she had first gathered her army. She ran past the slave pits of Zerhan, now abandoned and falling into ruin. She ran until her muscles burned, and her lungs ached, and the city was just a memory behind her. And as she ran, she felt something she hadn't felt in 15 years. Not peace, not exactly, but something close to it. The possibility of peace. The hope that maybe, just maybe, she could be more than the sum of her scars. The king was dead. The palace was ashes. Revenge had been served. Now it was time to figure out what came after the fire. 6 months passed in the northern forests. Threnody found a small, abandoned cottage near a stream and made it her own. She hunted for food, repaired the roof, and spent long hours doing absolutely nothing. At first, the silence was unbearable. Her mind kept returning to battles, to plans, to the constant vigilance that had kept her alive for so long. But slowly, painfully, she learned to let go. She learned to wake up without immediately assessing threats. She learned to watch the sunset without wondering if enemies approached. She learned, for the first time since childhood, what it felt like to simply exist. One morning, she woke to find a young wolf at her door. He was thin and scared, barely more than a pup. When she opened the door, he shifted to human form, revealing a boy no older than 12. "Please," he begged. "Please, you're Threnody, aren't you? The one who killed King Aldric? I need your help." Threnody's first instinct was to refuse. She had left that life behind. She was done fighting other people's battles. But something in the boy's eyes stopped her. "What's your name?" she asked. "Kester," the boy replied. "My village. There are men there. Soldiers who claim they served the old king. They're taking everything. Food, money, young girls. They killed my father when he tried to stop them. Please. Everyone says you're a hero. Can you help us?" Threnody felt a familiar weight settle on her shoulders. She had tried to walk away. She had tried to leave the violence behind. But the world kept finding her, kept pulling her back. "Where's your village?" she asked, already knowing she would regret this. Kester led her south for 2 days. The village was small, maybe 300 people, nestled in a valley between 2 hills. Even from a distance, Threnody could see the damage. Burned homes, frightened people. And in the center of the village, a group of armed men lounging around a fire, laughing and drinking. "There are 12 of them," Kester whispered. "They came 3 weeks ago. Said they were owed payment for their service to the king. When the village elder said we had no money, they started taking other things." Threnody studied the men. They were mercenaries, not real soldiers. Brutal and undisciplined. Dangerous to civilians, but no match for someone with her training. "Go to your mother," Threnody instructed. "Tell her to gather everyone who can't fight and hide them in the forest. I'll handle the rest." "By yourself?" Kester asked, eyes wide. "Yes," Threnody replied. "Now go." She waited until sunset, then walked straight into the village. The mercenaries saw her immediately. One of them, a fat man with a scarred face, stood up. "Well, well," he leered. "What do we have here? Another pretty girl for the collection?" "I'm Threnody," she said simply, "and you're leaving. Now." The fat man laughed. "Threnody? You mean that slave girl who got lucky and killed a senile old king? We're not impressed, little wolf." "You should be," Threnody replied. She shifted into her wolf form in an instant, closing the distance between them before the man could blink. Her jaws clamped around his throat. She didn't bite down, not yet, just held him there, feeling his pulse hammer against her teeth. The other mercenaries scrambled for their weapons, but Threnody released the fat man and shifted back to human form. "Here's how this works," she said calmly. "You leave now, and I let you live. You stay, and I kill every single one of you. Choose quickly." "There's 12 of us and one of you," another mercenary snarled. He was missing an ear. "We don't have to be afraid of some girl." "Then you're stupider than you look," Threnody replied. She moved before they could react. shifting and lunging. Her claws raked across Missing Ear's face. He screamed and fell backward. The fight was brief and brutal. These men had bullied civilians, but they had never faced a real predator. Threnody tore through them like paper, not killing but leaving each one with wounds that would scar, that would remind them of their stupidity. Within minutes, all 12 mercenaries were on the ground, bleeding and whimpering. Threnody shifted back to human form and looked down at them with contempt. "The next village you terrorize," she said quietly, "remember this moment. Remember that somewhere out there, I'm watching. And if I hear about you hurting innocents again, I'll find you, and next time, I won't be merciful. Understand?" They nodded frantically, too terrified to speak. "Now get out of my sight," Threnody commanded. They fled, limping and stumbling, leaving their weapons and supplies behind. Villagers emerged from their homes, staring at Threnody with a mixture of awe and fear. "Thank you," the village elder said. She was an old woman with kind eyes. "We couldn't have survived much longer." "You don't need to thank me," Threnody replied. "Just take care of Kester. He's brave. He deserves a chance to grow up in peace." She turned to leave, but the elder caught her arm. "Will you stay? Just for the night? Let us feed you at least. Show our gratitude properly." Threnody wanted to refuse, but she saw the hope in their faces, the gratitude, the relief. And she realized something. Maybe she couldn't escape her past completely. Maybe she would always be the wolf who fought back, but that didn't have to be a burden. It could be a gift. One night, she agreed. The village threw a celebration that evening. Nothing fancy, just simple food and music, and people grateful to be safe again. Threnody sat with Kester and his mother, listening to their stories, their dreams for the future. "What will you do now?" Kester's mother asked. "Will you go back to the capital? Take your place as a ruler?" "No," Threnody said. "I'm not meant to rule, but maybe I'm meant to do this. Help villages like yours. Stop people who prey on the weak. It's not revenge anymore. It's just protection." "Sounds like a purpose," the elder observed. "Maybe," Threnody agreed. "Maybe it is." That night, sleeping in a borrowed bed, Threnody dreamed of her mother for the first time in years. But it wasn't the nightmare she usually had, the dream of blood and screaming. It was just a memory. Her mother in the garden, teaching her the names of flowers. Smiling, happy. When Threnody woke, she felt lighter. Not healed, not fixed, but lighter, like some of the weight she had been carrying had finally been set down. Over the following months, word spread. The wolf who had killed King Aldric was traveling the countryside, helping those in need. Villagers sought her out with requests for aid. Bandits plagued a trade route. Threnody dealt with them. A corrupt noble extorting farmers. Threnody paid him a visit. A kidnapped child. Threnody brought them home. She didn't do it for glory or payment. She did it because she finally understood what her mother had tried to teach her all those years ago. Strength wasn't just about surviving. It was about using that survival to protect others. One day, nearly a year after leaving the capital, Threnody received a letter. It had been forwarded through several villages before finally reaching her. The seal was one she recognized, Draft's personal mark. She opened it carefully and read, "Threnody, I hope this letter finds you well. The capital is thriving. The new council is actually working, though we argue constantly about everything. Brennick finally retired. Solen took his place as chief advisor. Even Hadrix came back to help train a new city guard. But that's not why I'm writing. There's been talk, people asking about you, wondering where you went. Some say you're a myth, a story parents tell children about standing up to tyrants. Others swear they've seen you, that you saved their village or their family. I don't know where you are or what you're doing, but I want you to know something. You were right to leave. Not because we didn't need you, but because you needed to find yourself outside of the war. I hope you have. But if you ever want to come home, there's a place for you here. Not as a general or a ruler. Just as Threnody, the woman who survived, the wolf who taught us all that sometimes the only way forward is through fire. Your friend, Draft." Threnody read the letter 3 times. Then she carefully folded it and tucked it into her pack. She would keep it. Maybe one day she would return to the capital. Maybe not. But it was good to know that if she did, she would be welcome. For now, though, she had villages to visit, people to help, a purpose that felt right in a way revenge never had. She shifted into her wolf form and ran, the wind in her fur, the forest alive around her. And for the first time since that terrible night when King Aldric had put a collar around her neck, Threnody felt truly free. 2 years after the burning of the palace, Threnody stood at the edge of Valdir once again. The city had changed. New buildings had risen where old ones had fallen. The walls had been repaired and strengthened. Even from a distance, she could see prosperity in the busy streets and full markets. She hadn't planned to return. But 3 days ago, a messenger had found her with an urgent letter from Draft. The new government was facing a crisis, and they needed her help. Not as a warrior, but as a symbol. A group of nobles, resentful of their lost power, had begun plotting rebellion. They claimed the current council was illegitimate, that only someone of royal blood should rule, and they had found a candidate. A distant cousin of King Aldric, who claimed to be the rightful heir. "We don't need you to fight," Draft had written. "We need you to speak, to remind people why Aldric fell, to show them that the old ways were wrong. Please, Threnody, come home." So here she was. Home. If it could even be called that. She shifted to human form and walked through the gates. Guards recognized her immediately. Word spread fast. By the time she reached the merchant hall that still served as the council chamber, a crowd had gathered. Draft met her at the door. He looked older, lines of stress creasing his face, but he smiled when he saw her. "You came. You asked," Threnody replied simply. "I wasn't sure you would," Draft admitted. "You seemed so determined to leave this behind." "I was," Threnody agreed. "But I realized something. You can't run from your past. You can only choose what you do with it. So here I am. Tell me about this cousin of Aldric's." Draft led her inside. The council chamber was full, nobles and commoners alike arguing loudly. When Threnody entered, the room fell silent. "She's here," someone whispered. "The Wolf Queen," another murmured. Threnody walked to the center of the room and looked around at all the faces watching her. Some were familiar, others were strangers. All of them looked to her with expectation. "I hear there's a problem," she said without preamble. "Someone thinks they have a better claim to rule than the elected council. Is that right?" A noble stood up. Lord Vesic, a thin man with a pointed beard. "It's not about better or worse, Lady Threnody. It's about law, about tradition, about the proper order of things. Prince Yorick is of royal blood. The throne should pass to him." "The throne doesn't exist anymore," Threnody replied coldly. "I burned it, remember? The physical throne, yes," Vesic continued, "but the position, the authority, that remains. Someone must rule, and by all historical precedent, that someone should be Prince Yorick. And what does Prince Yorick say about all this?" Threnody asked. "Is he here to make his own case?" A man stood from the back of the room. He was young, maybe 25, with Aldric's dark hair but kinder eyes. "I am," he said quietly. He walked forward, and Threnody was struck by how nervous he looked. "I never wanted this. I was happy in my estate, tending my lands, living quietly. But Lord Vesic and others have insisted I have a duty to my bloodline. Do you agree with them?" Threnody asked. Prince Yorick hesitated. I don't know. My cousin was a monster. I'm not blind to that. But that doesn't mean monarchy itself is evil. A good king, a just king, could still serve the people well. And you think you're that good king?" Threnody challenged. "I don't know," Yorick admitted. "But I'm willing to try. I'm willing to learn. And unlike Aldric, I would listen to the council, work with them, not against them." The room erupted in arguments again. Some nobles shouted their support for Yorick. Commoners yelled about the right to choose their own leaders. Draft called for order but was ignored. Threnody let it continue for a moment. Then she shifted. Not fully into wolf form, but partially. Her eyes changed, her teeth lengthened. When she growled, the sound filled the chamber like thunder. Everyone fell silent. "Enough," Threnody said, shifting back. "You're all arguing about the wrong thing. It's not about who has the best bloodline or the oldest claim. It's about who will serve the people. So let me ask you all a question. What did King Aldric do with his power? No one answered. He sold children into slavery, Threnody continued, her voice hard. He bled the treasury dry for his own pleasures. He murdered anyone who opposed him. He turned this kingdom into his personal playground, and when anyone questioned him, he crushed them. That is what absolute power looks like. That is what monarchy without accountability creates. She turned to Prince Yorick. You seem like a decent man. You might even be a good king. But what about your children? Or their children? How many generations before another Aldric sits on that throne? How many more slaves need to be sold before you all learn that concentrating power in one person's hands is dangerous? So, what's your alternative? Lord Vesic demanded. Mob rule? Chaos? No, Threnody replied. Balance. The council as it is now. Representatives from all groups. Power distributed so that no one person can become a tyrant. It's not perfect. It's messy and slow and sometimes frustrating. But it's better than gambling on the goodness of one man. And what of tradition? Another noble asked. What of our history? Tradition isn't sacred, Threnody said. It's just what people did before. And sometimes, what people did before was wrong. Slavery was tradition once. Selling children was legal. Just because something is old doesn't make it right. She looked around the room. I didn't burn that palace just to see another king rise from the ashes. I burned it so we could build something better. Something where power belongs to the people, not to whoever has the right bloodline. Prince Yorick stepped forward. And what of me? Am I to have no role at all? You could join the council, Threnody suggested. Represent the noble families. Use your influence to guide, not command. Be a servant to the kingdom, not its master. Yorick considered this. A noble who works rather than rules. It's different. Different isn't always bad, Threnody replied. The council debated for hours. Arguments flared and died. Compromises were proposed and rejected, but slowly a consensus formed. Prince Yorick would join the council as a representative of the noble houses, but would have no more power than any other councillor. The monarchy would not be restored. The elected government would continue. Not everyone was happy. Some nobles stormed out in protest. But most stayed. Most accepted that the world had changed, and they would have to change with it. When the meeting finally ended, Threnody stepped outside, exhausted. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. It reminded her of fire, of burning palaces and broken chains. That was well done, a voice said. Threnody turned to see Lady Solène approaching. The older woman looked tired but satisfied. You have a gift for cutting through nonsense. Years of practice, Threnody replied dryly. Will you stay this time? Solène asked. The council could use your voice, your perspective. No, Threnody said. This is your kingdom now, yours and Draughts and Yorick's and everyone else's. I'm just passing through. But you'll come back, Solène said. It wasn't a question. When you need me, Threnody agreed. When things get bad enough that a wolf's teeth are required. But for the everyday work, the building and growing and healing, you don't need me for that. Perhaps, Solène said, or perhaps you're still learning that peace can be as valuable as war. Threnody smiled. Maybe I am. She stayed in Valdir for 3 more days, catching up with old friends, meeting new council members, watching the city go about its business. It was strange, seeing normalcy where there had once been chaos. Children played in the streets. Merchants haggled over prices. People complained about taxes and weather and all the ordinary frustrations of life. It was beautiful. On her last evening, Threnody walked to the ruins of the palace. They had been cleared somewhat, the dangerous rubble removed, but the site remained empty. There were proposals to build something new there, a park, some suggested, or a memorial to those who had died under Aldric's rule. Nothing had been decided yet. She stood where the throne room had been and looked up at the stars. They were the same stars she had seen from the slave pits of Zerhan, the same stars that had watched her suffer and survive. I did it, she whispered. I don't know if you can hear me, Mother. Father, but I did it. I burned down his kingdom and built something better from the ashes. Something you might be proud of. The wind rustled through the ruins. It sounded almost like a voice, like approval. Threnody smiled. Then she shifted into her wolf form and ran. Not away from the city, but through it. Past the merchant quarter and the noble estates. Past the old slave markets that had been converted into public squares. Past the walls and into the forest beyond. She ran until the city was just lights in the distance, until all she could hear was the wind and her own breathing. Until she was just a wolf in the wild, free and alive. And that was enough. Some stories end with kingdoms restored and crowns reclaimed. Some end with heroes riding off into glory. This story ended with a wolf running through moonlight, carrying scars that would never fully heal, but no longer defined by them. Threnody had been a princess once, then a slave, then a general, then a wanderer. Now she was simply herself. And that was the greatest victory of all. Behind her, the palace remained ruined, a reminder of what happened when power corrupted absolutely. Before her lay forests and villages and people who needed help, not a queen or a general, just someone willing to fight for them. King Aldric had sold her thinking she was worth only 300 gold pieces. He had been wrong. She was worth more than any crown or throne. She was worth her freedom, and she would never let anyone take that from her again.